Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Brief. This week we're talking about charges filed in the Breonna Taylor case, the FBI raids Mar-a-Lago, and 87,000 new IRS agents. Let's go. Brad, long time no see. Just kidding. I saw you over the weekend at the Young Americans for Liberty convention, which was great, but you left early, and you missed karaoke with Kennedy.
I know.
And I just
I'm
gotta
a little
say,
bummed about that.
it was a great time, but also you would have hated it, so it was very...
I'm also not a very good singer, as you learned at a fee retreat once. I have many talents, but musically I am not so inclined. Unlike Hannah, folks, who can she drops some absolute bangers. She can really sing quite well.
Thank you.
So she kills karaoke every time.
And so can Kennedy. We actually ended up duetting To Any Man of Mine, which was quite fun. And somebody even dedicated a song to me. Somebody dedicated Wonderwall to me, which was very funny.
Like a simp?
He just said that I was going to be the one that saved us all.
Oh, wow.
So I guess that
guys,
is the
you
territory.
have to know that, like, we did our event and it was great. There were, I don't know, maybe 75 people who came to our panel. Super engaged audience. We left 25 minutes for Q&A and we couldn't even get...
There were like 300 people at our panel.
Really?
Yeah.
Then I'm very bad at judging crowd sizes.
That room was a lot bigger than you think.
All right, sure. But that wasn't really my point, but I'm super bad at actually those kinds of estimations. But we left 25 minutes for Q&A and didn't get through all the questions because, like, dozens of people lined up afterwards to ask us questions or take photos with us. And I had a lot, but Hannah had even more. Jack and I left, went and got coffee, and came back after I had, spoken to every one of the people in the line and taken a photo with everyone. And Hannah was still had a line waiting for people to talk to her. So you have a simp army, a very loyal fan base, and it was very hilarious watching that because you kind of thrive in that environment where it's like, for me, I kind of feel like, oh, this is something I have to do in order to do what I want to do, which is get my ideas out into the masses. But I'm actually kind of uncomfortable in those situations. You really seem to shine.
Well, I think it's important to remember how much more experience I've had with it because it's actually very similar to being a pastor's kid. And I've said this for a long time. Being a pastor's kid really prepared me for, like, the spotlight because I don't know why. I've never understood this, but people are really into their pastor's family in a, like, very nice way most of the time. Sometimes it can get into very judgmental, weird territory too, but, like, most of the time they just really are beloved. And so when you go to a church, and my dad's church has thousands of people in it, when I go to the church, a lot of people want to talk to me and a lot of people know a whole lot about me. So I've kind of been used to that environment. Like, my parents were always like, you have to talk to everybody. You have to be friendly. You have to be welcoming. You're the pastor's kid. So that's been a little bit ingrained, but I do like it. I just remember how excited I was the first time I went to Young Americans for Liberty and I met, like, Rand Paul or Ron Paul, and, like, it was just so thrilling to me to meet somebody who had...
Oh, guys, I have to tell y'all a quick story. So everybody knows that I'm a simp for Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democrat congresswoman who ran for president in 2020. She's, like, very anti-war, very anti-interventionist. She's also drop-dead gorgeous, and I've always loved her style. I've thought she's so just really cool, and also she destroyed Kamala Harris in the debates and called her out, and that was, like, the best moment ever. But so Tulsi spoke at the Yale convention because they have a lot of overlap on foreign policy and foreign wars, and Hannah and I got to meet her. That's sort of like a VIP event after her speech or whatever. And this was devastating for me, this moment. This was a real, like, humility check, like, slap me back in my place. Because Tulsi follows me on Twitter. I've written about her. I thought she knew who I was. And I thought/hoped. But then when she came in and she came up to us and we were introducing ourselves, she shook my hand and said, "Hi, what's your name?" And looked me right in the eyes. And I was just devastated. I didn't let it show, but it was just a gut punch. I was like, oh, brutal.
But listen, it is you well know this, and I was reminded of this over the weekend too. It is so hard, even when I often do know people, but, like, they'll come up to me and they'll talk to me. I'm like, I know I've seen that person before, but maybe I've met them once or twice, and they assume, like, we know each other. And if they would just remind me of their name, I would be like, oh yeah, I know you from Twitter, I know you from online. But they don't do that a lot of the time. And so then you're left in kind of this awkward interaction. And I've had that happen where I've had to be like, I'm sorry, what's your name? And they are crushed by it. And it's like, it's not an insult. It's just really hard when you meet so many people, and also when the vast majority of interactions are online.
And
so
you and I, we meet a lot of people, but someone like her who's a politician, she must have met hundreds of thousands of people.
A day. Probably 700 people a day. I mean, really. So I bet she does know who you are. I bet when you said it, she was like, oh yeah. But it's tough, man. And actually,
I was so shook in the moment that I just, hi, I'm Brad. If I'd said Brad Polumbo, maybe it would have clicked for her. But I was just so taken aback. I was so devastated. And look, I know this is not logical. It's just emotional because I'm a simp. But yeah, that was devastating for me. And it's
I want to put out a PSA because I've been trying to think of a way to say this to people gently because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or sound like elitist or anything like that. But I just have a couple notes for people if you're at conferences that will help you have better engagements with people that you like. And the first one is remind people your name. Like, I never assume people know who I am, no matter how much notoriety I've gotten. I still go in with the mentality of like, even like Rand Paul, I've met him 100 times. I'm like, I'm Hannah. He's like, I know. But I'm like, just in case, right? Just to be helpful to them. And then if it's somebody that I've had like 1 or 2 interactions with, I'll say, hey, I'm Hannah. I met you last year at the ALEC conference. Like, and give them sort of a link to help them remember me.
See,
guys,
I don't
do that for people.
I very purposefully don't do that in many cases because it's just within, and before people think I'm too big for my britches, only within very niche liberty movement circles, but it kind of feels like a flex if I'm like, hey, I'm Brad Polumbo. Like people are like, and then people are like, oh, if I say that, a lot of times people will recognize my last name. Whereas if I'm just trying to be a normal person, I'm just like, hey, I'm Brad, nice to meet you. And if they know who I am, great, but I'm not like pronouncing I don't know. Sometimes I don't want it to seem like, because I've met a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'm so-and-so. And then they kind of, it seems like they expect you to know, and you're like,
no,
okay.
But it's the demeanor. It's all about how you do it. It's, hi, I'm Brad Polumbo. Versus like, hey, I'm Brad Polumbo. I don't know if you remember me. Like, it's just it's the connotation.
It depends. It's situational.
Yeah, but I'm PSA out there. If you want to have a good, deep, meaningful interaction with somebody you like, give them that. Start it off. If you come up to us, tell us your name. Give us something about you, because that's the other thing. A lot of people will approach you and they're like, hey, and they're really excited to meet you, and they're like, I'm a huge fan, and then they kind of stand there, and I'm like, okay, I want to have a conversation with you, but I don't know anything about you. You've given me nothing. So then I'm kind of trying to like coax information out.
My boyfriend has worked on me with this because I was so bad at those interactions at first. They'd come up and they'd say, oh, are you Brad Polumbo? And I would be like, yes, and then just stop. And now I'm like, yeah, I am. What's your name? Or where are you from? Or like, and so I'm learning how to make it less awkward, but it's still pretty awkward. But so you mentioned Kennedy. Yeah. And I want to talk about this because folks, here's a little behind the scenes and how it works when you're on television sometimes, because it's crazy. So last night I did Kennedy, which Hannah and I both do every other week or so, and you have you're on the panel, so you're on for 3 segments in the show, and they give you your topics around like 1 p.m. and the show's at 7. But I was on the A block and the C block. So we did our 2 topics on the A block, then we're on standby during the B block while she had another guest on a different topic. And then the producer, Chelsea, who is lovely, she comes into our ear and she says, hey guys, I don't know if you saw this, but Trump's home is being raided by the FBI as we speak.
Oh my gosh.
And she's like, so we're going to talk about that in 2 minutes. New topic. And then we're supposed to talk about DeSantis. So it's like, whoop, out the door. And then I go to Twitter and I'm trying to see what's happening. And I'm Googling it and like reading these breaking news stories that have only a little bit of information. So this was Monday night. We're recording this now on Tuesday around lunchtime. And so by the time you're listening, it'll be Wednesday morning. So preface this conversation with the fact that we don't have all the facts yet. There might be more information to come out. But, oh boy, this is a big story. Let me read from the Wall Street Journal just to set up the facts here. Federal investigators searched the Florida home of Donald Trump on Monday. That's Mar-a-Lago, prompting outrage from many Republicans, while Democrats said the law applies evenly to all Americans, including former presidents. People familiar with the matter said the search was part of an investigation into Mr. Trump's handling of classified information. It was made public in a statement from Mr. Trump, in which he said FBI agents were at his home. Now, Hannah, I want you to listen and grade my Trump impression, because he released his statement.
I already know.
These are dark times for our nation, as my beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago, in Palm Beach, Florida, is currently under siege, raided, and occupied by a large group of FBI agents. Nothing like this has ever happened to a president of the United States before.
I mean, bring the action. I love the drama behind that statement.
So then the rest says, such an assault could only take place in broken third world countries. Donald Trump, never one for hyperbole. Sadly, America has now become one of those countries. His capitalization is so weird. He just capitalized countries, capital C. Corrupt at a level not seen before. They even broke into my safe. So, Hannah, what was your first reaction when you just saw this story unfolding?
I think because I have no emotions around Trump, I'm probably one of the only people in the country that just didn't get super riled up over this. And also because, again, you know this, from my time working in the Justice Department, around the Justice Department and Justice community, I'm just somebody that waits for facts to come out. And there's very few facts here in this case so far. I mean, obviously, I've made this very abundantly clear. We've talked about it over and over. I've written about it extensively. I think the FBI is one of the very most corrupt agencies in our nation's history. I think they often act with political malice. I think that they cannot be trusted, and I think as a whole, I'd like to see them totally done away with. So I'm inclined to think there's shady stuff going on behind the scenes with them, no matter what. Also, though, I think Trump is a fraud and a crook and a liar and just corrupt himself, and so if he's done something illegal, like, I'll not be that surprised. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. But as a whole, what I said on Twitter is I just hope this outrage like riles up his fan base to actually support criminal justice reform and getting rid of the FBI, because usually they're pretty pro-state kind of crowd when it comes to matters of criminal justice.
I tweeted, y'all ready to ditch back the blue no matter who yet? Because there is this paradox between the thin blue line of law enforcement can do no wrong Republican thinking and this not invalid narrative that the law enforcement and the deep state is out to get Trump.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know about this instance, but we saw, for example, during the Russia investigation, FBI agents' texts were leaked where they were very anti-Trump and openly biased. So it's not a conspiracy to say that law enforcement has had it out for Trump. Now, I just want to explain how this would have worked. So prosecutors would have had to go and get a warrant before a judge, allege a potential crime, say, here's what we're looking for, here's what we're going to do. And in fact, even to get into a safe, they may have had to get a second warrant to open the safe. I don't know, but we'll have to see. So a judge would have signed off on this. This isn't something they just did rogue out of nowhere. But we've also seen judges sign off on a lot of shady stuff. So the way I look at it right now is there's two scenarios here. One is, there turns out to be real fire from the smoke, and they are just executing a lawful search against someone who committed a crime, and no one's above the law in America, including former presidents. But it also could be that this is part of a political witch hunt, and they're weaponizing the federal law enforcement power to go after a political opponent who they're worried about running in 2024. It really could be either, I think, or something in the middle.
Or both.
It
could be both, right? It could be that Trump very much did do something wrong. I believe what the scenario we think he's being accused of is that they think he took classified documents from the White House and the state's coming after him for that. Both can be true. He could have done that, and the deep state could very much be acting out due to political motivations and due to trying to protect their own self-interest and whatever's in those documents. Like, all of these things can coexist, and probably whatever is the most corrupt situation given these actors is the accurate one, but we'll have to wait to see. But as a whole, you mentioned a warrant. Yeah, but what we're going to talk about in a minute is another case where a warrant was obtained through lies. Like, you really just can't say. And that's my problem when it comes to issues of criminal justice reform and really of anything around the expansion of the state, is that there is so much corruption that goes into this. And I have this knee-jerk kind of reaction where I don't have sympathy for a lot of people in the Trump base or for Trump himself, because they're so carceral. They're so, even right now, if I talk about Brittany Griner, for example, and how nobody should ever be in prison for 9 years for weed, which is what Russia has sentenced her to. I have a number of MAGA people in my comments on Facebook at this very moment saying, well, she broke the law. She broke the law of another country's laws, and they have every right to make their laws and enforce their laws. And it's like, well, you don't think that as soon as it's used against somebody you like. You just don't like Brittany Griner because she protested the U.S., protested the very corrupt criminal justice system in the U.S., by the way. And you're mad at her about that. And yet now you're going to go over here and play victims when your guy has it used against him. And that's the sort of thing that I've always found very, very infuriating. I try to keep sympathy for those people because I see it as a potential learning moment for them. But these are people who very much would not have this reaction in a number of other situations
Yeah, I mean,
and
Trump
for people
himself,
they don't like.
we have not only, so like, I have on one hand sympathy for him that the Justice Department and the levers of government have been weaponized against him. Like, they spied on his campaign. Like,
they 100%.
But on the other hand, he became president and he reinforced a lot of those same powers when he could have struck blows against the deep state, in his words. For example, he signed into law a renewal of the Patriot Act without FISA reform of the spying system that was used against him. And then more recently, he favorably cited China. Yes, China, run by Communist Party. Their criminal justice system, and called for the death penalty for drug dealers with a quick and speedy trial, which he said with a laugh and a wink. So we actually have a clip of that we're going to roll.
If you look at countries all throughout the world, no matter where you go, the only ones that don't have a drug problem are those that institute the death penalty for drug dealers. They're the only ones. They don't have any problem. They don't have a drug problem. You understand that, Tom. I never even discussed this with you, but you understand it better than anybody. China has no drug problem. No, China has no drug problem because they have what's called quick trial, where a dealer, when caught, goes to trial quickly, and if guilty, is immediately executed.
On one hand, I do feel for Trump, but on the other hand, it's like, dude, shill for the police state, live with the consequences of an overreaching police state.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest disappointments of the Trump era was that they very much, the deep state, the FBI, the intelligence community, they very much did spy on him during his campaign. They very much did do that on behalf of the Obama administration. It very much was politically motivated. They put out whole lies and conspiracy theories around him and Russia and the Steele dossier, and they have never taken responsibility for that or accountability. They've never apologized. There's never been any repercussions for any of that. And yet when he won and he had the power to actually meaningfully gut the deep state, he didn't do jack. He was one of the least efficient presidents I've ever seen in my life. Like, all he could do was talk tough. He never actually went and followed it up, and it made me so angry because ever since the Patriot Act, ever since we got these FISA courts, we have seen a massive erosion of our Fourth Amendment, which very much does lead to wrongful convictions. It does lead to people being harassed by the justice system, being targeted is a very, very big problem in our country. And they use it to spy on all of us as well, right? We know that thanks to the revelations of Edward Snowden. And yet Trump didn't do anything. He didn't even pardon Edward Snowden. Like, what are you doing, my guy? Like, come on, get it together. He brought back the federal death penalty. It hadn't been used in quite some time, even though there were numerous issues of innocence and just subjective bias within the selections of who got the federal death penalty. He brought that back. He was very, very carceral during his time. I find it hard.
He did sign, let's give him some credit, he did sign the First Step Act.
He
criminal
did.
justice reform. That was good.
It was good, and I want you to know how hard that was for us to get behind the scenes. I hate when people act like he was some big champion of that. It was actually his son-in-law, Jared, he did sign it, but I'm just telling you, we
more
were
than Biden
the
has
entire
done.
Community. Yes,
more than
Biden
Obama
has done.
ever signed.
But let's not act like this was like his pet project. He really wanted to do it. It wasn't.
Yeah,
that's not what was happening behind the scenes. But that being said, he did sign it, so kudos to that. We got one tiny piece of criminal justice reform through him. Okay, but then like he went the opposite direction in virtually every other aspect when it comes to these matters, and it's just. I find it really annoying. I also will say, like, I saw this thing over the weekend. So we were at YAL, Young Americans for Liberty's big convention over the weekend. There was another big convention happening over the weekend, which was CPAC. And that's the Conservative Political Action Committee's big conference. This used to be, like, the political Republican convention every year. It actually used to lean a little bit libertarian. Ron Paul used to win the straw poll every year. It has since become a clown convention. I stopped going in 2020 because the last time I was there, I was so embarrassed to be seen. It was very fringe, very weird. And also Secret Service locked me on Media Row for 3 hours so Trump could speak. So I was like, I'm never doing this again. But I saw video. They were having, not cool. They were having their convention over the weekend as well. And these people had literally erected a fake jail cell within the convention. And when you went by this exhibit, you got like, have you ever been to a festival where you get those headsets? It's like a silent disco and everybody's kind of listening to the same song, but like it's all like in your headset and there's light shows.
Oh, like when you go to a museum and there's like a listen along headset?
Yeah, but like usually it's like kind of a fun like festival thing. Like we're all listening to the same music and we're dancing. No, at CPAC, they got these like silent disco headphones, but instead of listening to fun music, they were listening to people talk about how badly they were treated by the justice system after being arrested or charged with participating in January 6th. And while they listened to it, an actor sat inside the jail cell and pretended to cry. And so this video came out from CPAC of all these people walking around in their headsets, videoing this man crying in his jail cell. And he's wearing a MAGA hat and an orange jumpsuit, and the dramatics. I was cracking up. I was cracking up. I was like,
but is any of that, are their complaints legit at all? I haven't really looked into it, to be honest.
I mean, and this is my point in bringing all this up. Yes and no. Like, are they throwing the book at these people, and are they getting excessively long sentences? Yeah. And are they being treated badly in the justice system? Yeah, but no worse than millions of other people have been treated by this system for various other nonviolent crimes. And it's the very same crowd that doesn't care if you got wrongfully convicted and you're black, doesn't care if you got thrown away for 10 years because you had weed on you. They would have said, don't break the law if you don't want to do the crime, for every other situation except for this. And now, it's just an example of like when it targets them and their community, all of a sudden they care. And that's the kind of energy I just can't vibe with. I can't stand it, because if you don't stand up for people who are different than you, who you dislike against the state, it will eventually come for you. And there's not going to be anybody to stand for you or really feel sorry for you when that happens. And so it's just a word to the wise to actually be principled and stand up for what's right no matter what. And then you won't end up down here, far down the road where you have these kinds of things being carried out against people that are in your camp. So that's kind of where I'm at with this whole situation with Trump and the FBI. It's kind of like watching Auburn and Clemson play for me. I hope they both lose.
It's also, I will just say, very entertaining. Like, a lot of drama going. I got my popcorn over here. Munch, munch, munch.
Yeah, no, last night when I saw it breaking, actually my one first response was like, I'm so sad that we are being robbed of the opportunity to watch Trump live tweet this event. Like, I would love...
that would have been great.
I would have loved to see him live tweet Mar-a-Lago being raided. Like, I do miss the entertainment from Trump on Twitter. Like, it was just a blast.
I do still want them to bring him back.
Yeah, no, I had a great time with Trump on Twitter. I was never not entertained. Like, bring Trump back, honestly. All for it. Okay, well, when it comes to the Justice Department, they had a very busy week, actually. And so there were other surprise charges that dropped a couple days before the raid at Mar-a-Lago. And those came with an announcement from Attorney General Merrick Garland, who I guess gave the first statement I've ever liked in my life from this guy. So let's roll this clip real fast.
We allege that the defendants knew their actions in falsifying the affidavit could create a dangerous situation, and we allege these unlawful acts resulted in Ms. Taylor's death. The charges announced today also allege that the officers responsible for falsifying the affidavit that led to the search took steps to cover up their unlawful conduct after Ms. Taylor was killed. We allege that defendants Janes and Goodlett conspired to knowingly falsify an investigative document that was created after Ms. Taylor's death. We also allege that they conspired to mislead federal, state, and local authorities who were investigating the incident. For example, we allege that in May 2020, those two defendants met in a garage where they agreed to tell investigators a false story. The indictment separately alleges that defendant Meany lied to the FBI during its investigation of this matter.
So this is a big moment. It's been 2 years, I think just a little bit over 2 years, since Breonna Taylor was murdered in Louisville. And this was a very high-profile case. I followed it closely. I wrote pretty extensively about it because it was just indicative of so many issues I've seen behind the closed doors in the justice community that were kind of being brought to light. We knew that the warrant had been obtained in very fishy circumstances. We knew that there had been, at the very least, gross negligence. You had one officer in particular who just shot up the whole building like a drunken octopus. Like, he even shot into another person's apartment, like just lunatic. You've had Second Amendment issues where her boyfriend, very rightfully, when somebody was breaking into his house in the middle of the night, shot back and tried to defend himself.
They didn't announce themselves as police.
Yeah. because it was a no-knock raid, and like who wouldn't shoot back in those circumstances? They tried to charge him initially, even though that was a very lawful use of his Second Amendment rights. And then of course you ultimately had Breonna Taylor murdered, who was an innocent young woman who had never done anything that she allegedly was being looked at by police for. And as a whole, it was just a very, very sad story. So it kind of hit this fever pitch in the summer of 2020, which was while all the BLM riots and protests were going on. And then it sort of died because, sadly to say, we didn't expect there to be any repercussions, no matter how bad the behavior of police had been in these circumstances, because one, it's so excessively rare, and two, because they basically had tried to file charges at the state level against the one police officer who had fired around like a drunken octopus for wanton endangerment, and those failed. He was acquitted. So it's really hard to get, even when you do get them to bring charges against police, they can easily throw those kinds of cases. The DA might not work that hard. They might not gather that much evidence. They might not seek as aggressive of charges against them. On and on it goes. So either way, he was acquitted of those charges and nothing happened. So this was a really big announcement. I actually found myself kind of tearing up. And again, this isn't a conviction. This isn't justice yet. But just the fact that her family's getting some acknowledgement of wrongdoing in this case, especially when the scale of it was so vast, was emotional to me and surprising. What were your reactions?
Yeah, I was surprised because you don't usually see legal accountability. Honestly, the best you can hope for is that cops involved in these kind of abuses of power are fired, but even that doesn't often happen because of the police unions. In this case, though, it looks the charges against 4 officers involved in the March 13, 2020 raid include civil rights offenses, unlawful conspiracies, unconstitutional use of force, and obstruction. So, I mean, this is a big deal. They also are being held accountable for some of the people involved. So let's clarify this. In Breonna's case, the officers who fired the fatal shots were not involved in the warrant's creation and didn't know it was faulty, according to Merrick Garland, the Attorney General. However, several other officers apparently did know that the search warrant had used false, misleading, and out-of-date information, according to the indictment against them. So, I mean, that happens a lot, but it's very rare that we get people held accountable for it. And so I actually think that the Breonna Taylor case, both in terms of high-profile accountability, it's not there yet, but this is promising. And also, if you remember, this sparked a very real conversation about no-knock warrants, which is when the police obtain a special kind of warrant that they can barge into your house without knocking and then without declaring themselves as the police. And in this case, they say that they knocked, even though it was a no-knock. Who knows for sure? But they did not declare themselves as police. And so the thing about no-knock warrants that's so messed up is that somebody barges into your house in the middle of the night and doesn't announce themselves as the police, and you shoot at them. You've done nothing wrong in the minds of most Americans, yet you just are probably going to get killed by police or even face charges. And what happened here is that an innocent woman got caught in the crossfire. So the no-knock warrant thing, especially because they'll say, well, what if they have to take out a serial killer or something? And maybe there are very rare cases, but most of the time it's used in drug cases.
Yeah.
And their argument is they'll destroy evidence if we announce ourselves. And how much evidence are they going to destroy in 30 seconds? And also, why is human life less valuable than that? I mean, I think it's absurd. And so we actually saw a lot of movement to end no-knock warrants. I believe that the state of Kentucky, which has a Republican government, ended them in their state, and that's where this happened. So, I'm hoping that this whole saga could be a positive impact for change. It won't bring her back to life, and it won't heal her family's wounds, but it would be something.
Yeah, it's like how much, if you actually have a meth lab, how much evidence are you going to destroy in the intervening moments between a knock and police announcing themselves? And that's because they often are not using this to go after the drug kingpins they want to convince you that they are. They're using it to go after somebody who's got marijuana in a shoebox. It's absolutely ridiculous. That's basically the case here. Breonna Taylor's ex-boyfriend, I do believe, was involved in drugs. I think he sold some drugs here and there. But how these officers went about this is they actually lied on the warrant. Okay, this is a really big deal. These officers actually lied on the warrant and said that she was receiving packages for her ex-boyfriend at her house. But investigators have now confirmed that Officer Janes, who's one of the main people charged under the new federal charges, never confirmed any such packages with the Postal Service. So he just made this up. There's no checks and balances for this. They literally can get away with this kind of thing, and people die because of it, right? And had it not been for the really bright spotlight on Breonna Taylor's case, it's likely that there would never have been repercussions for this whatsoever. These kinds of incidents happen all the time in this country. That's the kind of crazy thing about Breonna Taylor's case to me, is it's not an outlier. We regularly see stories of no-knock raids gone bad, and so hers, I think, just happened around the time where these things were starting to blow up and it got a lot of attention. But fortunately, we have seen Rand Paul, who's the Republican senator from her state of Kentucky. He's the only person who's brought federal legislation so far to try to address some of this. And I'm hoping that we see more actions taken at the federal level more broadly to ban this kind of behavior, because it's really gross. And we also need a lot more attention paid to how people go about getting warrants in the first place, as this case shows. So Officer Joshua Janes and Brett Hankinson, who is the drunken octopus, I'd like to brand him as that, and also current officers Kelly Goodlett and Sergeant Kyle Meany. Those are the four who've been charged. Louisville police are moving to try to fire Goodlett and Meany. They're still on the force. And they let's see, by they I mean Janes and Hankinson. They face maximum sentences of life in prison, while Goodlett is pleading to a lesser charge, but he did plead guilty. So we'll see what happens there. Federal charges are a lot more significant than state level charges. It just means they carry heftier sentences. They usually get a lot more resources once you get to the federal level. There's a lot more investigation and evidence gathering, and it just is a different, more weighty kind of charge. So I think the fact that the Justice Department and the Attorney General are now involved in this case will probably mean a good thing for her family.
These are criminal charges, but it's unlikely, right, because of qualified immunity, that they will be Breonna's family will be able to sue these officers and get any financial damages. Isn't that pretty unlikely given qualified immunity in the status quo?
It is. Her family actually did get civil damages a year or so ago from the city, but that's just paid by taxpayers, right? That's not the officers having to actually pay that. I don't think it's even the police department that necessarily pays it. It's like the city's insurance and things like that will step in and pay those kinds of settlements. So yeah, it's very unlikely you'd see these individuals held civilly responsible or liable for her death. Although it's not impossible. It would just, the way qualified immunity works is if you can basically show somebody has been found responsible for very similar circumstances in a prior case. Is there a legal precedent that backs it up? And then you can get around qualified immunity. But
every case is a little different, so that's hard to do.
It's a very, very small window. So, but either way, I'm fine with them going to jail. That suits me just fine. So we'll see what happens, but we'll definitely be following that very, very closely. So that's one in Merrick Garland's column. I have about 10 other tallies against him, but we'll see. Maybe he'll be hot one day. All right. Over the weekend, probably not. Over the weekend, something else really big just happened. And if you're like us and you think that we should have fewer people working at agencies like the FBI, you're not going to like this news, because Congress just passed the bill that we spent some time talking to you about, the Manchin-Schumer Inflation Reduction Act, over the weekend. And we're not going to get super in the weeds on this because we've already detailed this bill in another episode. But what we actually did not do a deep dive on at that point was the expansion of the IRS and their agents under this bill. So we see that we're going to get $80 billion for the IRS under this legislation to increase enforcement, operational improvements, customer service, and systems modernization. That $80 billion is more than 6 times the current annual IRS budget of $12.6 billion. That's crazy.
They're more than doubling the IRS workforce. And according to Americans for Tax Reform, this provides 14 times as much funding for enforcement, like phishing efforts and audits, than it does for taxpayer services, like answering the freaking phone, which they're notoriously bad at. And in fact, this supersized IRS, the Washington Free Beacon reports, that it will now have more employees than the State Department, the FBI, Border Patrol, and the Pentagon combined. So it's also, I haven't read too much about this, but they're also getting like guns and more
yeah, so I've got more on that. Yeah, so basically, they're going to add at least 80,000 new agents. Some estimates I've seen have said 87,000 new agents. A whole lot more agents, basically. It's going to be a lot of people who are going to be crawling through your bank accounts and looking for any little error that you might have made. I want to talk about the reasons I think this is so concerning, because Brad and I have both been sort of like getting into it over the weekend on Twitter over this. And anytime you push back on these kinds of stories, there's a certain number of people on the left who will try to claim that you're just mad because you don't want to pay your taxes. And I want to say that I have wealth managers, I have accountants, I have a whole team. I am paying my taxes. I'm not stupid. But like, there is a whole litany of reasons why you should be concerned with any expansion of government, and why especially you should be concerned with expansion of this agency within the government, because they are hella corrupt. Let's roll this clip, actually, of Senator Cardin, who said, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, literally.
Can you understand how 87,000 new IRS agents would scare the heck out of millions of Americans?
Well, millions of Americans aren't going to be impacted by that, other than getting better service from the IRS, having their telephone answered, getting the questions they need in order to comply with our tax laws. The auditing is going to be focused on those of high income, the large corporations, etc. So there's no reason to be fearful. And if you have paid your taxes and if you comply with our laws, you should want to make sure everyone else does that.
Which, I mean, we've heard that before. I think around the time the Patriot Act was passed, that's what we were told. If you're not doing anything wrong, if you're not a terrorist, you have nothing to fear. And now we're all being spied on left and right. Like, get out of here.
It's pretty silly, because this idea, they're only cracking down on rich people's tax evasion, it's just not true. I mean, there's less than 1,000 billionaires, and they're going to hire 87,000 new agents. You don't have to take our word for it that this is really a crackdown on working Americans to squeeze every last nickel and dime. The Joint Committee on Taxation, which is Congress's official scorekeeper, this is from the Wall Street Journal, says that 78 to 90% of the money raised from this crackdown would likely come from those making less than $200,000 a year. Only 4 to 9% would come from those making more than $500,000. So this isn't technically a tax increase in terms of your liability, what you owe, but in all practical purposes, they're going to be collecting more revenue from people that's currently going unevaded, and they're also going to be doing way more audits. The IRS audits low-income people way more than wealthy people because it's easier. They don't have armies of tax lawyers and accountants. So I just think that this whole thing is, they're doing it, of course, and we've already broken this down, but they're doing this to fund a disastrous, wasteful bill that just funnels hundreds of billions to green energy and healthcare subsidies, including for rich people. So, and they're like, oh yeah, and we really need to do this big spending bill while we're already suffering out of control inflation. And so let's squeeze every last nickel and dime out of working Americans and make the IRS into its own little enforcement army bigger than all these other agencies. To me, it's just nuts.
Yeah, so this is going to more than double the number of Americans who will be audited every year. And if you think this is just going to target the quote-unquote rich, you're very bad at math, which I already assume you're bad at math if you think that, because that means you support Democratic policies and therefore cannot be good at math. But the thing is, as a whole, like, there are not that many billionaires and multi-millionaires in this country. They'll never get rich off that. On top of that, those people have full teams of people to help them get through the very, very dense tax code, to help them find loopholes, to help them ensure that they're not being targeted for audits. This is going to go after you, as Brad just mentioned. We already see that the IRS spends the bulk majority of its time going after people who are lower income. And the reason for that is that it's much easier to get through their finances, right? They've even said that in their statements where they've had to explain why this is, that it doesn't take as many people. It's much easier to comb through their finances. And secondarily, they do it because they know you can't afford to fight back. And this is something that has always made me so mad working around government, is I see this from civil asset forfeiture, where the average seizure is under $1,500, to the IRS, where the average person being audited is, borderline in poverty. They do it because you can't afford to hire an attorney to come fight back. It's very expensive to fight back against the government. And so most people have no other choice when they're targeted in this way other than to roll over and cough up whatever money the government's telling you that you owe to them. So this will be abused. There's no question in my mind. And if you look at some of the practices of the IRS, even over the past decade, this is a very, very malicious and corrupt agency. I want to play this clip from Dana Lash talking about how they released the private information of several really wealthy people recently in order to drum up public sentiment that would make people want to demand higher taxes. Let's roll that real fast.
This idea that, when the IRS was leaking all of this information about wealthy people, they were trying to conflate the idea of new money and old money, ignore how new money made their money, and just get everybody mad at this fabrication of an a class of people who have a bunch of money that they didn't earn and don't have to pay tax on. And they did that just so they could emotionally manipulate people into voting for higher taxes. And they should have never, the fact that they leaked that in the first place, that right there should have been the immediate disqualification for any consideration of either new money going into the IRS or an expansion of the IRS, particularly after a subsequent IG report showed that they only answer their phones 19 to 20% of the time. I mean, we can't. First off, they shouldn't even exist in the first place. The IRS is an entirely unconstitutional entity. Was it even properly ratified in the Senate? Because there are a lot of questions about that. It's unconstitutional. It is theft. Just because it's government sanctioned doesn't make it any less of a sin. It is an absolute sin. It is a sinful bureaucracy, a sinful department. It is sin and agents of sin. The end. It is an entire department that is built upon theft. I don't have anything nice to say. I'm very, it's not what our founders envisioned. In fact, they actually didn't even believe in taxes and levied unless we were in a time of war, which then kind of makes me go into the ditch a little bit with the tinfoil hat about War Inc. and True Cons and neocons and all this other stuff. The True Con and War Inc. and all of this stuff, and the constant perpetuation of wars to maintain this demand for constant taxation. Anyway, my whole point is that you have about 90,000 people in the United States that are worth over $50 million. You have Democrats that want 87,000 new agents because they say they want to go after wealthy tax cheats. That's the line, right? Wealthy tax cheats.
And so, that's just one case of many. But under that information, they leaked their income and their taxes, as well as their investments, their stock trades, gambling winnings, and the results of their audits. That's so
illegal.
Bad. Yeah.
Nobody's been held accountable for that, by the way.
No.
They say they're doing an investigation, but they haven't come up with anything yet, and don't hold your breath.
No, don't expect anything soon. And that's a huge violation of privacy. And I just think that shows that this is a politically motivated agency, right? They've also specifically targeted people for their political views. Under Obama, the IRS admitted that they gave extra scrutiny to organizations with the names Tea Party or Patriot that were seeking tax-exempt status. And conservative groups at the time were speaking out about being harassed significantly by the IRS and were forced to jump through really inordinate hoops just to keep their tax-free nonprofit status. So that was a huge scandal back in the day that, again, there was really nothing happened. They just
Lois Lerner, she was in charge of the IRS at the time. She retired with a full pension, and there were never any consequences for her. So what we have essentially is a rogue agency that has abused its power, getting a doubling of its workforce and a huge enforcement army. I don't know, Hannah, what could possibly go wrong?
I know. Defund the police, but give IRS guns and hire 87,000 more of them. What could possibly go wrong? I want to be really clear about this, too. I'm not just exaggerating here. They're actually arming these people. The Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS allegedly can carry guns, but the IRS has been buying more guns and more ammunition in recent years. They bought up nearly $700,000 in ammo in early 2022 alone. So beware. They are going to be coming after you. They're going to be coming after the middle class. I really like how this one YouTube person put it. Let's roll this clip real fast.
The idea that you can hire 80,000 new bureaucrats who start out at reasonable salaries and often make more than that. The idea that that can be recouped by going after that slim minority of the population is ludicrous. So number one, it won't be on a paying basis. The math doesn't add up. Multiple economists and banks have looked at the numbers here, and they've all claimed that it doesn't add up. Number two, you'd be hiring too many agents for that group of people, even if you went after every single one of them. So of necessity, unless you want them sitting there twiddling their thumbs, at some point they're going to have to go after other suspected tax cheats. What you're going to have is a doubling of audits. It's obviously not just going to impact the people at higher incomes.
So yeah, I think as a whole, it's pretty easy to see the end game here, and I think anybody who thinks you have nothing to be afraid of as long as you pay your taxes is frankly delusional and very far removed from the realities of our political system at this point.
I think they are, and I think it's on folks like us to try to raise awareness, because most people kind of like vaguely dislike the IRS, but they're just not aware of all of this. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to say about it other than that I think that progressives are betraying a lot of their promises and that this is going to go poorly for working class, low-income Americans. But unfortunately, you know, a lot of times they'll pass things, they'll slap a nice name on it, like the Inflation Reduction Plan. But yet, 10 years later, when the receipts and the results are in and they're abysmal, like the Affordable Care Act, for example, we can look back now and see how all these ways it made healthcare way more expensive. But people don't really do that work. They don't revisit it. They don't think critically back. They kind of just falls off their radar and they don't think about it again. And they just take the narrative at face value. And so if they're told, oh yeah, I'm fine with this, this is going to reduce inflation and they're only cracking down on the rich, the only people who are really going to be forced to reckon with that when it doesn't come true are the actual targets of the audits.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have two more things I want to add. One, I think it's very clear that this bill, this particular expansion under this bill, are meant to go after gig workers. This administration hates the gig economy. They are working at the behest of unions. Unions are desperate, and I mean desperate because they are bleeding membership. They are desperate to push people back into old school 9-to-5 jobs so that they can force you into membership, so they can take your money that they then give to Democrats, and that's the cycle here. They tried to pass the PRO Act last year that would have hurt the gig economy and made it illegal basically to do gig work. Then they tried to stuff that into the Build Back Better bill. And then when they couldn't get that, they started issuing directions through the Labor Department to try to reclassify how gig workers were documented and what could classify as a gig worker. And now you see this, where I think it's very, very clear they're going to go after people with 1099s. They're going after people who make side money. They're not going after people with W-2s. They're going after people who have found a way to start building their own businesses, small businesses. And I think that's the most disgusting part of all of this. But the second thing I want to say is that I'm really mad at Republicans for this, because I think the obvious answer here is simplify the tax code, right? If you would just do your jobs and simplify the tax code, which people have been just begging you to do for decades. We have a 30,000 page tax code. Nobody even knows what all is in this. It's so easy to mess up on your taxes, even when you are trying to do everything by the book, because it's so complicated and ridiculous. So we need a simplification of the tax code. We need to reduce the need for there to ever be an IRS or a bunch of agents under it. And I think you made a point online that got some pushback about how, like, we can't fully get rid of the IRS. And I guess that's probably mostly true at this moment, but we could certainly reduce the need for its size and its power.
Yeah. I mean, it could be 10% of the size that it is. It could be folded into another agency and abolished. But, like, my only point was, I've tweeted, like, of course people do this annoying thing where I've tweeted 20 things bashing the IRS in the last 24 hours. My one tweet where I was like, yeah, abolish the IRS sounds great, but, you know, as long as we're going to have some federal government, which we always are, I mean, we're going to have a military and have to fund it at the absolute bare minimum, you're going to need federal taxes and some degree of federal tax collection. So you could call it something else. One interesting idea that I got in terms of pushback that I thought was very interesting was the idea that you completely abolish the IRS and then say that you have like a 5% flat tax or something, because we simplify the tax code. You just have state collection agencies collect and remit the money to the federal government. That's a very interesting proposal that I think is actually practical and workable. I just don't like what I guess I would call sloganeering politics, whether it's like the left or the right or the libertarians. It's like, abolish the IRS. It's just, it sounds cute, a lot like more catchy than drastically scale back the IRS and simplify the tax code. Yeah. But it's not super practical, and it's not, a lot of people who aren't plugged into, you know, super libertarian movement stuff are going to hear that and just be like, what are you talking about? Abolish the IRS, huh? Like, it's just, I get a little bit put off by that kind of messaging. I would love to abolish the IRS, but I just think that, like, it's not super realistic and maybe a bit counterproductive when we, also some people, and this doesn't apply so much to libertarians, this applies to Republicans, but like Ted Cruz, He's out here saying abolish the IRS on the Senate floor. And it's like, sir, you're also out here pushing for record-breaking military budgets every year and voting for more spending. You can't have that and abolish the IRS. Like, that doesn't make sense. But then again, consistency has never been Ted Cruz's strong suit.
Say, follow through has never been his strong suit. He'll like. I remember one years ago. This is when I quit liking him. He like did this whole thing to like end the Fed, had a bill to like end the Fed, and then he didn't even show up to vote in favor of his own bill. And I was like, okay, like. He's a bit of a weasel, but I'm with you. I think that we can talk about where we'd love to see things, utopia, which would be good to get rid of a lot of these agencies, but we have to be pragmatic, and the reality is I've never in my lifetime seen a major government agency abolished or done away with, so if that can't happen, then we've got to start finding concrete ways
I think the most attainable one to completely abolish is the Department of Education.
You really think it's actually possible?
Of all of them, I think yes, because you could frame it as education is going to be handled at the state level, right? It's not like you could completely say that education is already mostly handled at the state level, and then the DOE is just a big bloated bureaucracy that wastes tons of money and writes regulations for one size fits all. I think the Department of Education is much. If we could break through the propaganda that means salary cuts for teachers, like, no, the DOE doesn't fund teachers' salaries, local government does. Or it means closing public schools, it also doesn't, although, but not necessarily mad about that, but yeah, I guess you get my point. I do think it's the most attainable.
I feel
but
like
even that is not super attainable.
If it was going to happen, it would have happened under Reagan, when you actually had a Secretary of Education that was like wanting to get rid of it. And
we had DeVos, and she cut it by 10%.
She did a great job.
But people have a misunderstanding about a secretary can't abolish a department. Congress has to.
Yeah. But my point being, he was working towards it, and then the wind shifted politically. And I think what happens is you have these people who have the right idea, they want to scale back government, but when they get there and they're actually surrounded by the special interests, they're surrounded by the threats and the lobbyists and the actual real weight of the system stacked against you, I think they fold. I think it's why Trump folded on all privacy issues. I think it's why many have folded on education. I feel a little bit pessimistic about that, but I do think there's a lot that we could be doing to try to reduce these agencies and remove their powers. And again, things like simplifying the tax code, that kind of pulls the like rug out from underneath them and saying like, you don't actually need this many agents because everything's pretty simple and people know how to do it, and they go online, they just get told how much they owe in taxes and they pay it, and we're good, So I think those are things you could do to move in the right direction, and we've got to be pragmatic.
But Hannah, we can't do any of that because we need to fundraise more money to pay down the national debt.
In Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah. So guys, this story, I hope you like my little transition there.
I did.
This story is pretty crazy. Jack covered this for the website, but the federal government is finally getting serious about reducing the national debt, except in Ukraine. They're actually sending billions to pay the Ukrainian government's bills, yet Congress still doesn't care about the debt in our own country. So here's Jack's reporting that worried federal officials signaled on Monday that they were finally going to do something about dangerous amounts of debt in Ukraine. And then he shows us this Senator Rand Paul tweet where he's responding to USAID, which is a federal agency for foreign aid, that says, news: the United States, through USAID coordination with the Treasury, is providing an additional $4.5 billion, that's a lot of money, in direct budgetary support to the government of Ukraine to help alleviate the acute budget deficit caused by Putin's brutal war of aggression. Now, Rand said, wow, the U.S. government is actually trying to reduce the deficit? Oh, wait, it's for Ukraine. Never mind. Business as usual with your tax dollars. And I just think this is nuts to me. I have a lot of sympathy for the people of Ukraine, but at this point, first off, I'm not sure sending them weapons and stuff is a good idea, but at least but paying down their deficit? I mean, ma'am, we ran a nearly $3 trillion deficit in 2021, the second highest ever on record. And yet our tax dollars right now are going to go pay off another country's budget deficit. Make it make sense, because I can't.
I can't make it make sense, and I think this is why we can't have nice things. The number of times we do this kind of crap is insurmountable. And this is something I actually more so blame the American people for, because this comes down to not holding your elected leaders accountable. You're not paying attention to what they're doing. You're not following them. You're not staying on top of them, and they get away with this kind of stuff. And I'm sure there's some kind of sweet deal in it for them. I'm sure they're making deals with companies in Ukraine or leaders in Ukraine. Like, there's always that kind of stuff going on. And it's not going to be in your favor. It's not going to be for your benefit. And this is why, as a whole, we always have such stringent, or at least I do, and I think you mostly do as well, such stringent stances against involving ourselves in the foreign affairs of others. I really don't think that we should be ever involved in the foreign affairs of others unless there's an existential threat to our homeland, period. Like, I think that has not happened since World War II. So I can't stand that we give anybody arms or weapons or money. Stop using our resources overseas. Our country is crumbling. It's becoming a second world country. I don't think it's becoming like a third world, shithole country like Trump would say. But I do think it is definitely reducing. We don't have beautiful architecture anymore. We don't have great trains. We don't have speedy transportation. Our airports are disgusting. Our roads are falling apart. Our schools are garbage. Like, I'm really just very fed up and sick with this. People should be madder about this. They take 30% of your income and they ship it overseas. Why aren't you mad?
Yeah, this is a funny thing from the USAID website about this money. They said, this contribution was made possible with generous bipartisan support from Congress.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, Jack pointed this out, how generous they are with our money.
These people are crooks.
So,
I mean, really.
More here. For those counting, $8.5 billion in direct budgetary support to the government of Ukraine is now what we're up to.
Wow.
And look, the Quincy Institute has actually pointed out that a lot of this money is going into the pockets of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and other military-industrial complex contractors, and that's great for them, but sucks for the American people who have to pay for this stuff. And I think it's all really unfortunate. I mean, look, I really do feel bad for the people of Ukraine. I think we should be accepting refugees. I think there should be humanitarian aid. But this idea that we're going to pay, and that can be done by private charities as well. But this idea that we're going to pay down their budget deficit, to me, while we're drowning in debt and struggling from inflation and doing nothing meaningful to address it, it's just like this. I would have thought that this was a Babylon Bee parody headline if I didn't know that it was real, and It just makes me want to vomit all over Congress.
Agreed. I think it's highway robbery. It's really very, very gross. All right, let's go to the mailbag. What do we got this week?
So we got a bunch of comments from the YouTube, which one of these is, why does Brad look so disgusted in the first few seconds of the show? I think what this is that I have a weird resting face. I look good when I'm talking, like on TV or whatever, but when I'm just standing there waiting for them to call on me or whatever, I just make weird faces sometimes because it's awkward. You don't know what to do. It's like a little weird. Yeah. And so I think that's what it is. When we're starting rolling, I'm just like there while you're reading the intro. I'm just like here.
Yeah, I think that is probably it, because you also, like, I'm kind of off camera when I'm doing the intro and I come back, so you're kind of just staring, like, we're not actually engaging. I think it's probably that, if I had to guess. That's pretty funny. All right, another person said, I think Joe Manchin is getting rolled. He signed on for it because they're promising him pipelines. He has nothing on paper. He just has their word. And let's be honest, their word is a large pile of poop emojis. You're right. The bill is crap. More money flushed down the toilet for nothing. More taxes for working class to endure. You can say it's not going to tax working class, which is a lie, but anything that negatively affects our bottom dollar is effectively a tax, which...
Go off, King.
Yeah, go off.
Now this one... Somebody was very upset with us for our thoughts on the Beyonce ableism controversy.
No.
This person says, your insensitivity is insufferable. What? And then she quotes a bunch of our things. One person sparked the controversy. No, using that lyric meant the controversy was an inevitability. I've never heard that used as an ableist slur. Good for you. So... I've spent a lot of time around these communities is the same argument as I have a black friend.
I think this might be the same person who started the controversy on Twitter, the one person who just, like, started on Twitter coming over to YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Because I refuse to believe anybody actually cares about this whole ridiculous controversy.
They keep going. We won't read through all of it. But do you know what this means? The last line says, why are you still on stage 2 of the Robbie Williams scale? Do better.
No, I don't know, but I assume it's some woke diversity coach. I'm not sure.
I don't know. But this
Not
next one is
sure.
fitting. Right after this one, and on the same video right below this, it says, woke culture is a manifestation of people being unhappy and not knowing why, so they invent a reason to rationalize it. Yup.
And that's the tea. That is the tea. All right, and the last one says, wait, Hannah, you're not a Georgia Bulldogs fan? Traitor. Guys, I've lived in Georgia for all of like a year. And also, my birthright was being born into Alabama football fandomness. I was born with a golden spoon in my mouth in college football land. The greatest college football team of all time. Of all time. The greatest college football coach of all time. Why would I jump ship for the Georgia Bulldogs? Not happening. Sorry. Roll Tide.
Meanwhile, my boyfriend's family's trying to get me to do fantasy football with them, and I'm like, sir, this is a Wendy's. I haven't watched I watch the Super Bowl sometimes, but mostly for the commercials.
No, I don't do that, but I will do the fantasy leagues for like the Bachelorette. That's pretty fun. You like?
I really want them to have a gay Bachelor season. But they haven't. They never have.
Why haven't they?
They've poo-pooed the idea. They say it's not our audience and it's a different show.
Well, somebody should do it. I'd watch. Can you imagine?
There's this really, and I have to dig it up for you, but I showed this to my boyfriend. There's this gay content creator who's super woke, but I like some of his stuff, and he dug up this reality TV show from like 2005. It was a pilot, and I don't think it ever went anywhere, but it was like a gay dating show, but it was so cringe, and it was so like 2000s. It is hilarious. I don't know. The whole thing is really funny.
But it was just one episode?
I think it was just a pilot. I think it never went anywhere. But it's just so cringe now and looking back. And these guys are so stereotypical. And also, like, it's also weird seeing people, how they dressed in 2005. Yeah. And then also it was, like, extremely cringe because you know how, like, cheap reality TV is. It's like, all right, well, for this date, they're going to learn African dance from these dancers who happen to be here. Okay. Like, it's just totally random.
Wait, I have a question. If you weren't in a relationship, would you have ever gone on a reality dating show?
Yeah, I think I would.
You would have. I'm curious because I feel like I'm just too old to have done it, and also, like, I have a boyfriend, but I think the whole process would be fascinating. Like, I'm so curious about it.
I'm dramatic enough for it. I would love to look at the camera and say, and that's when I knew he was a snake. And then just, like, do all this dramatic cutaways. I'd be perfect for it. And then I'd spread rumors about the other people. I'd go back to my high school self where I was a little gossip shit stirrer.
I don't think I'm also competitive enough for it. I'd be like, if you don't think I'm amazing and you don't pick me first immediately, like, bye. Like, I'd be like, no, not competing with these other girls for you. Either you recognize my worth or I'm out. Like, I'd probably get super...
I used to watch this game show called Baggage. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It came on after Family Feud years ago. And so it was hosted, I think, by, like, Jerry Springer or something. Basically, like, you'd have a person, two people come on, and then... they'd reveal their baggage, small, medium, and large, like a thing about themselves, and then the person would have to decide yes or no. But then at the end, the person who's like the bachelor who's sorting through all the people, at the end they have to reveal their baggage. And what would sometimes happen is that they would pick a person, accept them even through all their baggage, then reveal their baggage, and that person would say, "Nuh-uh, I'm out." And I'm like, I love that energy. Going all the way to win this competition, and then, because you get the prize regardless, and then you just saying, nah, your baggage is too bad for me. Plot twist.
Oh my God. Okay, one last story. I was on a cruise one time, and they were doing one of those, like, how well do you know each other couple things? You know?
Cringe.
Like that game? Yeah. And this couple did not know each other very well, and, like, one of the questions was to the woman, like, to the husband, if your woman could change one thing about you, what would it be? And he said something like, my sense of humor, and she put his height. Like, something he, like, could not change.
You want to know something that scarred me for life? When I was like 14, I was on a cruise with my dad and my stepmom, and they did one of those shows, and I was there, which I don't know why, because those are adult themed.
Yeah.
And one of the questions was, "Where's the craziest place you've had sex?"
No!
And they wrote the family room couch. And
Oh my
I'm
God.
like I'm sitting next to my grandma, and we look at each other and we're like,
God. Also, like, that's really funny. That was the craziest place they'd had sex, but like, ew! Like, I hope they put a sheet down or something. It's so weird. I used to hear my parents have sex sometimes. I'd be like, no! I'd like run out of the house. It was awful. I know, it's awful. But now I'm like, you know what? I'm glad my parents love each other. Like, good for them. Like, go for it. Okay, let's do hot takes before I'm gonna get in trouble with my parents. They're like, put hair in our dirty laundry. Okay, I don't know what my hot take is yet. Let me think for a minute. You go first.
So, my hot take is that I used to really hate sweet potatoes, but now that I'm older, I like them, and I think they're very good. And I actually think sweet potatoes are better in most things than regular potatoes. And apparently they're healthier. They have more nutrients.
Yeah.
So, I used to be anti, and now I'm pro.
I don't think you'll get much pushback on that. People really love sweet potatoes. All right.
But there is that gross thing that people make at Thanksgiving where it's like sweet potatoes and marshmallows or something, and I've always been grossed out by that.
All right, maybe this is my hot take. Actually, it is. Thanksgiving is gross. It is.
No.
Yes, it is. Thanksgiving is a gross meal as a whole. And I will bring this up because you and I had a dinner this weekend at Yao, and you remember I said to you, I wish this was my Thanksgiving meal every year. Because
And I looked at you like you were crazy.
To me, it was the
It
perfect
was
meal.
Mediterranean food.
Yeah, it was great. It was like prime rib with this amazing au jus and like green. What was that green sauce? I bet you didn't try it with your prime rib.
No, do you remember? So they had this roast that you went up and he cut you a piece, and I had him go back in the kitchen and cook it well done.
You and
'cause it was
Tasha
still
both.
dripping red.
You and Tasha both were like, please ruin my meat. Like,
He looked at me with disgust.
I bet he did. But no, it was like this great prime rib with like these wonderful seasoning sauces, and then it had like a salmon. Spike almost lost his mind because Spike can't eat very many foods because of his illness, and so he eats a ton of salmon, and he was giddy about that dinner. And then what else was it? It was like a really nice broccolini. It was a pork loin with like a cherry sauce. It was so bougie, and it was delicious. It was mashed potatoes. It was great.
I want my mashed potatoes and my pie, and I won't accept anything else.
I want to go back to the Gaylord Opryland for Thanksgiving and have that exact meal on Thanksgiving. That's what I want.
The hotel was really nice.
It was nice, but it was a very kid-forward hotel. Like, I wanted to go to the pool one day.
Just hate children.
I don't hate
it's
children.
It's not good for you.
I don't
You're the
hate
Wicked
children.
Witch of the West.
I like some children, and I just never
You're
want
like
to
the witch in Hansel and Gretel who tries to put the children in the stove. That's basically you.
No, it's not. I like some kids. I just don't like all kids, and I don't like being swarmed by kids. And that's what was happening at the pool. I looked out my window. I was going to have a nice relaxing day the second day at the pool, and I look out, and there's a water park, and there's like thousands of children screaming and just running. There's not a chair to be seen, and I'm like, that looks like my living hell. That's not relaxing at all. So
they should have two pools.
Yes.
Because I thought that looked fun with the water slide. If I'd had more time, I was in and out, I would have wanted to go on it. But I agree with you that like having a kids area and then a like adult serene area is probably the best way to go, because I love kids, but it's not always the vibe when you're an adult on a relaxing vacation.
Also, I like good kids. Like I actually don't dislike kids. I dislike bad parents. Because I come from a family where, like, we were very well-behaved kids. We went everywhere in public with my mom. We would never have been running around screaming at the top of our lungs in any public environment. And the problem is these days, a lot of kids act like maniacs because their parents are really bad parents and don't know how to, like, have basic discipline and order or, like, teach their kids basic manners towards other people in public. And that's what actually bothers me. But I actually don't blame the kids for that. I think it's very, very bad parents. All right, guys, that's a wrap. We hope you had a great time with us this week. Check back in next week, and until then, stay based.